John, are you gonna get the episode started?
Rachel, you were the podcast host here. I saw your video on social media. You had some strong opinions about some movies, and it said so online.
That's strange, John. I don't have any recollection of that at all.
Rachel, you were the podcast host here.
I'm sorry to differ with you, John, but you are the podcast host. You have always been the podcast host. I should know, John. I've always been here.
Okie dokie. This is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, and part 2 of The Shining.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
Here's John again.
I mean, I don't know how many other movies you could use that intro for. Probably just this one.
What, here's Johnny?
Yeah,
I mean, I could do it every time. It's not wrong.
you could, because you are always Johnny.
But I feel like that was Johnny Carson's thing.
It was, that's true. Until Jack Nicholson made it Jack Torrance's thing. And I'm Rachel.
Yes, and we are a married couple. And we met in Colorado. It was a cold winter. There was a storm a-coming. And we decided, against all odds, to try to take care of a hotel during the off-season. And, well, Rachel killed me. And now we're here doing a podcast in the afterlife.
Amazing. I was really wondering where you were going with that. Not disappointed.
Yep. Well, if you are just joining us and this is the first Shining episode you're listening to us, I would highly recommend you backtrack just an episode, because this is actually part 2 of our deep dive on Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And in the first episode, we covered sort of the filmmaking, the distribution, production, the cast, that sort of stuff. But we have more things we would love to talk about in this movie. And honestly, we could probably do 8 episodes on The Shining if we really wanted to. We're not going to do that. But yeah, should we sort of pick up where we left off?
I think we should.
Does that mean it's time for Vibe Check?
Vibe check. Here we go, we're checking the vibe. Vibe check. Sounding good and looking real nice. Vibe check. How'd they make that guy unalive? Vibe check. It's better off without CGI. Vibe check. Kissing on point and we're feeling fine. Vibe check. The slow burn is taking its time. Vibe check. Here we go, we're checking the vibe. Vibe check.
It sure does mean it's time for Vibe Check. I was trying to carry the... Never mind. It worked. It worked in my head. That's the place that matters, right? We're talking about The Shining. It's all about the internal.
How would you describe the vibes before I get into anything? How would you describe the vibes of this film?
Dysregulating.
Yeah, I think that's what this movie does best, right?
Yeah, you said that before we watched it this last time. You didn't say dysregulating. You said get your nervous system ready or something like that. And I was like, that's exactly it. This movie is so dysregulating to the nervous system. The vibes are uncomfortable and tense and relentless and weird and surreal. Are those all good words?
Yeah. No, I definitely think that even if for some reason you're watching it and you're not getting any real scares out of it, I think it's impossible to avoid the unease that the atmosphere creates. And that's really due to several factors. The first one being the cinematography, right?
Definitely.
Too bad they didn't do a great job on cinematography in this film. That's sarcasm, obviously. For those of you who can't hear sarcasm, my mom's like that sometimes. Not to throw her under the bus. But
she'd be like, bus? Where?
Yeah, and then she wouldn't go to the doctor. But anyway, the cinematographer of this film is John Alcott. John Alcott was born in 1930 in England, and he began his career at the lowest levels of the camera department, like many people do, working his way up through roles such as clapper loader, which that was a job, like when I was a little kid, I thought that seemed really cool. I had like sort of a fake clapper. I think I got it at MGM Studios in Florida. You know, the clapper, the take 3.
Oh, no, I was imagining, you know, those plastic sticks with 2 plastic hands on the end that clap? You said clapper, and that's what I thought of immediately.
I also have a clapper, or I used to. I think it's somewhere here in the box, you know?
No way. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Well, yeah, because we haven't implemented it. Sometimes it's kind of sensitive, but we have less traffic around here. Back when I had it, wherever I used it before, it would get set off by like trucks driving by and stuff. So like a truck would drive by and the lights would go on.
Oh, yeah. Now we're talking about the clapper that turns lights on and off.
Yes.
Not the movie clapper or the little plastic hand clapper.
Yeah, no, I moved on. I thought
I missed the transition. I thought you were talking about like the movie clapper getting set off. And
no.
Okay, I'm here.
Scenes are just starting up without any... The actors are in panic. It's kind of like Shelley Duvall when she missed her cue running outside there.
Exactly.
Oh my God. He also did roles like focus puller, which seems like that role seems like the most stressful to me.
I don't know. Oh, what is the focus puller? I don't know what that is either.
The person who pulls focus. So if the camera's moving, you got to keep whatever you want in focus.
Oh, that sounds stressful.
Yeah. And then he was also a camera operator before he became a cinematographer. His early work gave him a strong technical foundation in several areas like lenses, focus, and lighting. Certainly all the areas you want your cinematographer well-versed in which well-versed it be. Mm-hmm.
Nice work.
He eventually became closely associated with Stanley Kubrick and worked on 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange. I think those first two he was in the camera department, but not necessarily director of photography. But he was cinematographer for Barry Lyndon, and he won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. And that was obviously the Kubrick movie before this. I had written down somewhere some other movies he worked on outside of Kubrick. I'm not seeing it right in front of me, and I'm not going to go crazy. You can look it up if you want to find his full list, but one movie of particular interest to us is a movie that came out this same very year. He was also the cinematographer on Terror Train.
I just saw that because I was looking it up to see his role in Clockwork Orange and saw Terror Train. That is so funny. What different movies. Oh my goodness. And Beastmaster.
Yep.
Wow. That's really cool.
Which is crazy because he came from this production, which was like a year long, ended in like April or May of 1979, the production on this film. And then I think it was November and December of 1979, he did Terror Train. And this came out, The Shining came out in May of 1980. And then I think Terror Train came out in October. So slightly different movies, to be sure.
Yeah. And yeah, very different. I think going from working on anything with Kubrick to working with not Kubrick sounds like, anyway, it would be a big switch according to a lot of the things we talked about in our last episode.
Well, and what little I was reading about the production of Terror Train, I mean, I think he was a big asset on that set due to his experience up to that point, you know, filming on a train and just all the sort of unique setups that were necessary and getting it lit properly. Like, I think he was a major reason why. I mean, that movie to me looks super cool. It's very different than The Shining, but I love how that movie looks. And we owe it all to John Alcott. We owe it Alcott. Never mind.
I love that you tried, though.
That's all I'm here for. In terms of his cinematography style, Alcott is known for naturalistic lighting, attention to real-world light behavior, and technical precision. I think a really good example of this is the Colorado Lounge in the daytime. Incredible. Again, that's where my mind gets blown that it was a set, but because it really looks like, for those of you who don't live in wintry areas, places where it gets super snowy in the wintertime, it does get really bright, even though a lot of the days are actually very gray. What light gets reflected off of the snow can be so bright, and they really captured that in this film. And the way they did that, they had like these huge lighting rigs outside the windows of the Colorado Lounge. Again, it's all indoors.
Crazy.
And they had like, one rig had like 700,000 watts of lighting on it. Another one had close to 1 million of this light that they're just like pumping through the windows to give it that look. His work avoids theatrical lighting in favor of realism. And that works great in this movie because it's that realism that contributes to the unease. I don't know about you, but sometimes there's days where it's like midday and sunny, and maybe I don't have something going on right at that minute, that I get feeling a little anxious. Like it's that weird like sunshine anxiety.
I'm not sure I'm on this journey with you, but I'm here for you.
Well, either way, it's creepy. And certainly his attention to realism is very clear in this movie. Like everything is very naturalistic, right?
Oh, that's part of what this particular viewing made it really uncomfortable, is how real it seems. Jack Nicholson scares me.
Well, and in terms of the relationship between Kubrick and Alcott, I'm not talking about like their friendship, but their working relationship. Kubrick maintained strong control over the visual design, including the framing, composition, and camera movement. Because as we discussed last week, really that's Kubrick's main focus, right? Is sort of the visual composition, even over sometimes dialogue-driven storytelling. But Alcott's role was to execute lighting, manage camera operation, and translate Kubrick's vision into practical cinematography. Like, how can we take this vision and put it on screen exactly the way we're imagining it?
That's like my tattoo artist when I bring an idea and say, turn this song into a tattoo. And then he does that. And then I sit there for a few hours until it's done, because I can't do that. But Kubrick, not an entirely accurate allegory. Kubrick was actually a photographer and knew how to do all these things. But just similarly in that his job was to translate the idea in ways that that Kubrick wanted him to, right?
Yeah, and I think probably Alcott's knowledge of lighting might have really been a major aspect of his contributions, because that's a big thing for cinematography, is how are we going to get this shot that we're talking about so it looks the way the director wants it to look? How do we light that? Another very interesting aspect of the filming in terms of camera work in this film was the use of Steadicam, which at this point was a very new technological innovation. And the operator / inventor of the Steadicam was Garrett Brown, and he was actually hired by Kubrick to help in the filming of this movie. And I'm pretty sure he was often operating the Steadicam when it was used. And it was a relatively new technology. Some people say that The Shining was the first movie it was used in. That's not true, but The Shining is widely considered one of the first films to fully realize the potential of the Steadicam. And just simply put, what a Steadicam is a body-mounted stabilization system, which uses a harness and counterweights and a gimbal, which allows smooth movement without tracks. So if I was just carrying a camera around doing a handheld shot, it's a little bouncy, a little jerky, and that's really good for certain shots. And you see, a lot of shots like that in horror where it's handheld because it sort of creates a little more feeling of chaos or danger, that sort of thing. But you don't always want that. What the Steadicam allows the operator to do is to be carrying the camera, but have completely smooth motion. So the camera is basically existing separately of the camera operator. It's kind of like floating smooth in space. Does that make sense?
Yes. As someone who doesn't understand these things very easily, made sense. Well explained.
And Kubrick used it because he wanted continuous movement through space and immersive navigation of the hotel. And the reason other traditional methods wouldn't make sense for this is because like a dolly would be too rigid. Not that they didn't use dolly shots in this. A great example of a awesome dolly shot is when the family is first walking through the hotel together. They're getting the tour on closing day, and they're like way across the other side of the room, and sort of the camera's following along their path all the way through the Colorado Lounge. That was a dolly shot. And also handheld is too unstable for what Kubrick was looking for. So some key usage, if you're looking for examples of how this was used in The Shining, particularly in Danny's big wheel sequences, when he's riding his tricycle, somebody is following him from behind with the Steadicam. And Garrett Brown was talking in one of the featurettes, to get it down lower, they basically inverted how it worked. So instead of the camera being at the top of their machine, at the top of their thingy.
Rig?
Yes, thank you. At the top of the rig, they sort of inverted it so the camera's at the bottom so it could be at child height level and following him around. The other cool thing about that, it's more of a sound design thing, but just the when he goes from carpet to wood floor, when Danny's driving his tricycle, and the sound of the wood floor, and then it kind of disappears as he's going over the rug, and then the sound comes back again. It's almost like hypnotizing. And they actually went back in post to recreate that sound because they didn't have it mic'd the proper way to pick that up the first time around. But anyway, the Steadicam allows for rhythmic movement and sort of spatial awareness, and it creates a psychological effect. In a way, it's basically too smooth to be human and too intentional to be neutral. So it adds to the unease that we were talking about before. And almost like there's a presence.
Kind of like Uncanny Valley, maybe? Like between human and non-human?
Yeah, like we're dealing in a different realm.
Very cool. I had never thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
The use of the Steadicam in this film had a major impact on the film industry. It helped establish the Steadicam as a major filmmaking tool, which we see in movies all the time. We're really used to it by now, but back then it was not something that you saw all the time. So just like we had talked about last week, Kubrick was always sort of on the edge of innovation in his filmmaking. That was the major sort of innovative filmmaking technique in this movie. That's pretty much all I have on cinematography. I mean, there's a million other things you could talk about. Just the colors, so natural but so vibrant.
Oh, the colors, 100%. I also noticed those, which I guess were dolly shots of, I wrote in my notes, what's up with walking straight towards the camera and then having these fade-in shots as they're walking through the hotel when they first get there. And so I, dove deep into that and discovered one person who said that the characters approaching the camera create psychological pressure and a sense of inevitability. And it's used in a lot of Kubrick films, that kind of like head-on walking straight towards the camera, creating psychological pressure for the viewer as the character comes towards them, which I thought was really interesting. I noticed the cinematography more on this. And there's one kind of thing that I was asking, the crash zoom or the snap zoom, where it comes up really quickly. Like there's a snap zoom in the finale. And I was like, oh, it's kind of like Kung Fu movies, sort of. And that's where it was used. It was strongly associated with 70s Kung Fu and exploitation cinema. And Edgar Wright and Quentin Tarantino both use that kind of shot a lot. So I thought that was, I don't usually notice these things as much. So when I notice them, I am proud of myself.
Yeah, and they use it a few times in this movie, actually. I think the first time is when, at closing day, when Danny is in the game room. They, like, when he starts to either see some or sense something, it crash zooms right on his face. But,
yeah, very disconcerting. Adds to that unease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, so I'm glad you brought it up.
We can move into special effects.
Yeah, tell me about the special effects.
So I got frustrated because I was seeing all of these terms used interchangeably, VFX versus SFX versus CGI. So I've got a quick little side quest on that. But again, different places argue about this. But what most of them agree upon is that special effects are practical physical effects that occur on set during filming without the need for digital enhancements. So practical effects and special effects are used the same, which I've not been using it that way. I've thought that practical effects were a kind of special effects, but a lot of places said that that's the same thing. And then VFX, visual effects, is adding or enhancing imagery in the scene that can't be achieved practically. So that's post-production, green screen, matte painting, motion tracking, the kind of stuff that we don't have in this movie. So in this movie, there's only special effects. And I'm still not clear on whether in-camera effects count. Anyway, so a lot of sources say that only practical in-camera effects were used instead of CGI special effects. Which again, practical effects and special effects, are they the same thing? I don't know. But there's no CGI, so there's that. I tried to figure out so I would be less confused, and I ended up becoming more confused.
That'll happen.
Especially when you're working on The Shining. So it seemed appropriate. It seemed like the definition of these terms was figured out by someone at the Overlook over a long winter. So the only in-camera special effect in the entire film, although you said there were two of them, but I only found this one, was the shot from the balcony looking down into the main lounge where Jack has his typewriter set up and there's a huge fire in the fireplace. And that one was done, John Alcott, I saw a quote from him that was the only special effect in the whole film, or the only in-camera special effect. And so according to John Alcott, he shot the scene without the fire burning, rewound the film, turned off all the lights, set the fire, and shot the fire by itself. So according to the director of photography, the only special effect was that shot. But we know there's a ton of practical effects in this movie that are incredibly famous and well-known. Let's talk about the blood elevator. It took weeks of pre-production just to get the right color or consistency. They needed hundreds of gallons of this fake blood, and it couldn't look like paint under the bright lights that we just finished discussing. Blech. So I guess fake blood kept leaking through the elevator doors and frying electronic components. And every time they tried it and failed it, they had to scrub the entire set clean. So every time they messed up, makes me feel so much better about the things I do in my life where I make mistakes and there's a lot less cleanup afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were asleep at this point in one of the behind the scenes. I'm not sure if it was the Vivian Kubrick one or the sort of more generic making of The Shining, but it showed, several crew people like mopping up, and it wasn't just like a bit of blood. It was like an inch of the fake blood.
So much. Yeah, crazy. On shoot day, when they finally got the shot, there were 4 cameras set up simultaneously with different lenses and film speeds. And the camera operators had to climb inside oversized wooden chests to avoid drowning, which is crazy. They had to get it in one take, and it took close to a year of preparation. Kubrick left the set entirely that day, I saw. I don't know how accurate this is, but he was too anxious to watch it. And the wave of blood was so violent that it picked up furniture and carried it down the hall. And Leon Vitali, who was the chief assistant and the casting director we talked a little bit about last week, he said, "I tell you, it worked in a way we never thought it would work. When Stanley saw the footage, he was so happy." Another thing that I'm less confident about, but what makes a great story, is supposedly Kubrick convinced Warner Brothers to include it in the trailer by telling them that it was rusty water and not blood, and lied to them and said it was rusty water, which is pretty great.
That's actually my pseudonym. Pseudonym?
Rusty water?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, the blood appears first as in Danny's vision, and then again when Wendy runs through the hotel. So this kind of bookends Danny's experience before and then in the hotel. One of the most famous scenes in horror movie history, right? I can't imagine what that would have been like to see then as something new. You know what I mean? And we talk about that a lot with especially older movies, but what it must have been like to see that special effect. We've seen so many special effects since then, including lots and lots of CGI. So that effect these days would not be done with hundreds of gallons of fake blood, probably.
Yeah, I had also heard that a bunch of the blood like went out into the neighborhood or something, but I don't remember exactly.
I didn't see that, but entirely possible. Again, as we've said, there's so much anecdotal evidence out there and so many stories about this movie that we cannot cover them all. The axe in the door. Well, quick little trivia bit. Originally it was a prop door.
This is one of those ones where I think that there's multiple versions, but okay. I'm interested to hear which one you got. So the
version that I found and wrote down is that Nicholson, who was a former volunteer fire marshal, demolished it too fast, and they had to switch to a real door so that he wouldn't break through it too quickly.
Yes.
You heard that too. Okay.
I also saw somewhere that they went through 60 doors, which I don't think is true.
That's crazy. I mean, everything about this movie is crazy.
I don't think even the strongest firefighter would be able to keep up a shoot where you had to bust through 60 doors.
And he's like not weak looking, but also he's not like super muscle man. That's a lot. Axing things takes muscles.
Yeah, I don't think that they went through 60 doors, but if I'm wrong, then that's
it could be
a fun thing.
And then, I had a note about his final freeze, that very abrupt ending where Jack freezes to death in the hedge maze. I was wondering if when he was grabbing at his chest, he was having a heart attack, but I guess it says exhaustion and hypothermia. There was an article on Collider that talked about that. So,
every time I thought that, because I was taking notes, obviously, and I could see in the periphery, and I thought he was grabbing his chest, and then when I would look up, I realized he was holding his coat.
Oh, to keep himself warm and not clutching at his chest. Okay. Yeah, there's an article on Collider that I'll have linked in the show notes that talks about the ending and explains that part. So I guess we're not the only ones who thought, was he having a heart attack? And then there are photos from behind the scenes that show the wood and styrofoam bracing system that were built to hold Nicholson still for the frozen in maze shot, which is crazy because it looks very cold when you're watching it. But again, that set was like hot and salty, right?
Hot and salty, my other pseudonym. I'm not sure. I guess I don't know whether they were using the outdoor maze set or the indoor maze set for
that last shot. I don't know either. The maze is the last thing I had info on. Obviously, there's so much more. But you talked about how the hedge maze exterior was built on the L Street back lot. The overhead shot of Wendy and Danny, that's the other shot that could technically be considered a visual effect or a special effect. There was a composite of the miniature model filmed from above when Jack is kind of looking down. And then there's the life-size maze section with Shelley Duvall and Danny Lloyd, which was filmed from the building roof. And it was composited using mask plates. This was before green screens were around. And so that was another kind of special
because I think it's still considered an effect. I'm not sure what type.
I think so too. So maybe
it's not like they were shooting it and they were in there.
But it was done not in camera. Maybe that is what Alcott was talking about. Was that the only in camera effect that was done just on the film itself was that fire shot. But even so, for a movie like this to have only two effects that are done with the cameras and not with a physical model or something.
The other thing with that maze I don't think that it was just the maze set that was on the back lot. They actually built just the center part of that maze.
Oh.
Because it was shot next to like a high-rise apartment building.
Oh,
they had to be very, very high up to capture that shot. So they couldn't use a crane like they would do for a lot of like higher shots. They needed higher than that.
I wonder if the building roof that's referenced is, in my notes, is the roof of the building next door. Like if there was a high rise.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, me either. I didn't dive too deeply into it. But I did see that it was considered a genuinely impressive achievement for that time. And it doesn't often get spoken about, that shot, just because there's so many other things that get brought up. But
Well, it seems so simple, but when you're like watching it and actually thinking about it, they are so far down.
yeah.
So it was really, really high. And then to blend that shot with the maze model,
Yeah.
super cool.
Really neat. That's all I have for special effects.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that just briefly going back to what you were talking about, such a simple thing that you would never think about, the fireplace going while he's typing, and the fact that they couldn't get, you wouldn't be able to use, I guess, the same exposure to get the shot that you're looking for. I think this is the first time I really understood what an in-camera effect means. I mean, you're literally, we taught, a lot of effects you do after the fact.
And that would be visual effects.
Right.
Right.
But this one, they literally wind back the tape
Yeah.
and do the effect in the same camera, just do the shot, but of the fireplace.
Yeah, I do think some of this terminology is not clear. At least there's not any agreement about it that I was able to find with 5 minutes of deep research. But I did think it was interesting. It did inspire me to kind of figure out the difference between these different kind of shots. Love this film education we're getting as we do this fun podcast thing that we do.
Leave it up to Stanley Kubrick. Make sure that we understand all the ins and outs.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie FX?
No.
We should find it. I watched that with my parents back in the day. It's pretty fun. It's like an action movie, but one of the protagonists is like a special effects artist, and that comes into play, if I'm remembering correctly. A lot of fun. Should I tell you about the music?
Yes, music and sound design, please.
Well, it's interesting how they did the music on this. First of all, we have the work of Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elkind. They were responsible for the part of the score that was new and original in this film. However, a lot of the score, I should say, that Kubrick used was pre-existing classical compositions. And the composers of that music was Bela Bartok, Krzysztof Penderecki, and Giorgi Ligeti. Sorry if my Italian or other languages are falling short there. So a lot of the music was pre-composed work. However, the contributions of Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elkind are extremely important. I was really interested to find, I have a crossover of my life with Wendy Carlos. She's a pioneering electronic composer, and she's well known for her album Switched on Bach, which came out in 1968, and it really helped popularize synthesizers. If you think about other music at that time, the Beatles were just starting to dabble in synthesizers around that time as well. So it was pretty brand new. I'll have to play you some Switched on Bach later. You should, listeners, check it out too. But when I was in 7th grade, I probably was in my most memorable music class, like school music class. I've taken plenty of lessons and stuff too. That's neither here nor there. But Mr. Martin, my 7th grade music teacher, was really into a lot of this stuff. And he definitely did like a lesson or two on Switched on Bach and was playing it for us. He also was one of those people who pronounced the H in WH words. Very memorably.
What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So she also did work on A Clockwork Orange, Wendy Carlos did. And then Rachel Elkind often collaborated closely with Carlos on composition, production, sound shaping. But really, their synth stuff in this is so cool. And even just the opening notes is really what we're talking about here. Talk about setting the tone for the whole movie as the cameras are, you're getting those aerial shots over the lake and that dun, I can't do it with my face. But you know what I'm talking about, right? That deep.
Yeah, that really deep.
Almost horn, sinister deep horn synth sound. So
did you know, this is just a little tidbit about Wendy Carlos that I did not know. Wendy Carlos came out as a transgender woman in 1979. She'd been living as a woman since 1968 and had gender-affirming surgery in 1972. But that's pretty wild just because being openly and publicly transgender and successful in that way was not common in the 70s. So and I guess that it happened in 1979, it says. So she's kind of an early pioneer for trans rights and visibility. Yeah, she began counseling well before Switched on Bach, began hormone replacement in 1968.
Crazy.
So yeah, what a really cool, she disclosed her status in a series of interviews in Playboy magazine in May 1979.
I don't have that issue.
So that's really, really interesting. I would love to learn more about her. There is a biography that came out about her in 2020. And yeah, what a fascinating woman.
So basically, Carlos and Elkine were responsible for the opening theme that I just sang so beautifully.
You did sing really beautifully.
And also a lot of the electronic tonal textures and then some of those eerie notes that really sort of escalate throughout the movie. Really, that sort of classical composition mixed with this new, innovative electronics. You see a lot of that really in the movie when you start to break it down. You know, we're talking about the filming and the use of, you know, you've got classic cinematography styles mixed with the Steadicam usage. You have classic compositions that existed before the making of this film being combined with innovative use of synthesizers. I mean, obviously, this is not the first horror movie to use synthesizers, but you have sort of the innovator, one of the main innovative, what do you call it? Is it innovator a person?
Innovator, yeah.
Of synthesizers contributing to this film. So really neat that way. In terms of sound design, in The Shining, the line between music and sound is sort of intentionally blurred, it seems.
Oh, yeah. I have some notes on that.
The music consists of composed or selected pieces. The sound design relies heavily on ambient noise. Do I say ambient?
Ambient.
Yeah.
It's ambiance and ambient.
That's dumb.
I mean, it's English.
And then
we steal words from other languages and say them wrong.
And why do we say what?
Ambiance?
Ambient.
Oh, and ambient is all related to it. Yeah.
Changes your environment?
Because I think it must be, has something to do with sleep.
But anyway, the sound design relies on ambient noise, tonal layers, and environmental sound. And Kubrick merges these elements so the viewer cannot clearly distinguish between sort of the score and the environment. And the effect of this is that it removes emotional guidance in some ways. You're not getting as much. I mean, obviously, like I said, there's some of that synth stuff, those high-pitched noises that indicate when things are getting really tense. But you don't have a lot of emotional guidance through the music like you do in some movies. And this blurring also removes clear interpretation, just like all the other aspects of this film. So it all really works together to create to amplify the constant unease. We keep coming back to this constant unease.
Yeah, well, there's just this disconnect between things that usually connect, right? So the music usually would tell you how to feel, except now it's coming in weird places and in strange ways that you're not expecting, and it's diegetic and non-diegetic, and you're not sure which one. And then, yeah, it just, again, keeps you on your toes, keeps you off balance, which is really strange because one of the things I wrote is it's just so satisfying watching this movie. Like, my eyes feel satisfied when I watch this movie. And yet emotionally, I am disjointed and not at ease. And yet every shot is just perfect, like so pretty.
Yeah, it's somehow cozy and uneasy at the same time.
Perfect.
I don't know. But in terms of there was no, at least from what I found, there was no single credited sound designer like we might have in some films today. Instead, the sound was shaped by Kubrick, so he had overall control. Then also the music editor, Gordon Stainforth, was involved. And then, of course, the tonal elements, like we said, came from a lot of the work of Carlos and Elkine. They used a lot of ambient layering echo, repetition, and silence contrast, there are, a lot of like silent sequences or moments in this movie that other movies might have chosen to back up with some sort of sound or emotional cue. And so the overall result of all of this work is that the Overlook Hotel feels alive, oppressive, and constantly present. Like there's a constant presence that exists because of the hotel and not the people in it, if that makes sense. Maybe the people who were in it, but you know what I mean.
I do.
But you said you had other notes on sound?
There was just one scene in particular, the tennis ball against the wall where he's hitting it against the wall. And I thought that it was another one of those weird ambient sound things, but instead it's actually diegetic. It's like within the soundscape of the movie, which that one particularly caught my eye and then caught my ear. And the ice crackling sounds as Wendy and Danny get into the snowcat at the end, those crackling sounds as Jack is literally freezing to death, just got me real good. Those choices were just really, really interesting and added a lot.
There's so many. I mean, and people have done it. I think you can go scene by scene and just analyze every aspect of the movie that we're talking about. But we're not doing that. Will. That is it for all the vibes.
That it is.
You ready to move on for a bit of story time?
Oh, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Here's story time. Why don't you, I know you told us about the cast, but that only, tiptoes into what is really important to the story.
Yeah.
Which are the characters.
Man, oh man. Let's talk about Jack Torrance to start.
Never heard of him. Which one is he?
Yep. He had a few scenes in this movie. I think the central question that I kept returning to when I was thinking about and writing about the character of Jack is whether Jack is being possessed by the hotel or whether he was always this person and the hotel has just removed the guardrails from his life and is now allowing him to be this person. This is also one of my main contentions with the film when I watched it closer to reading the book, because the character of Jack Torrance in Stephen King's novel is much more sympathetic. I wrote in my notes, I usually can empathize with anyone, but I cannot empathize with Nicholson's Torrance. He was always an asshole. The hotel just brings it out in him. This was my response, and I think this is also one that it takes away the gradual descent, and maybe this is just part of the limitations of film as a medium, but for me, Nicholson reads as unstable from the very beginning. And then the scene that he has with Grady in the bathroom, you were always here, you were always the caretaker, that the hotel doesn't create him to be a monster, but rather it recognizes him. And part of this is supported by something Kubrick said. He did an interview with French film critic Simon, which is on the internet. I will try to, I think I have it in the show notes. It's Ciment. And Kubrick...
That's cement.
But I think he's French, so I think it's Simon. Kubrick told Simon it suggests reincarnation, that Jack has always been the caretaker, the fact that he's in that 1921 photograph. And so I don't know, we could talk about this for a really long time, but I think is Jack, I think you see it in that very first scene of Jack with his family in the car on the way. There is a disgust and annoyance with his wife and his child that is kind of under the surface. And Torrance in the book likes his wife way more, and his kid. Again, I'm willing to concede that some of this may be a limitation of the medium. However, I was very uncomfortable with Jack Torrance. This viewing, looking at it a little bit through that, a little bit more through that lens, and not questioning quite as much because I'm further away from reading the book, and so really just kind of being present with it. the way that he talks to Wendy, the first time he splits on Wendy when she comes to him and he's typing, and Wendy she just wants to bring him a sandwich, right? And he just gets so mean so quick. And the fact that she just kind of takes it indicates to me that this is not brand new behavior from Jack, that this is stuff she's seen in the past, but that she doesn't like it, but she's not like, he's possessed. She's like, oh, he's in a bad mood. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Jack and whether he has been changed by the hotel or whether it's just kind of bringing out what was already naturally in him?
I'm not completely certain, and I'm not sure I see it the same way every time I watch it.
Fair.
I do think that there's a possible interpretation. It's tricky because we already know what Jack becomes at the end. And I'm trying to imagine if you're sort of watching it fresh for the first time, you don't know anything about it. One thing, and again, like you're saying, there's sort of the limitation of it being a film, is that after closing day, it jumps ahead a month.
Yeah.
So we don't know necessarily what exactly is transpired in that month, only that like Jack is sleeping in because he stays up late, but that's not that unusual necessarily for an artist.
Truth.
And he's working away. He's kind of grumpy. I don't know. And he's stressed on the drive there, but that's not that crazy outside the knowledge of what is to come, right? Like, I get frustrated on long drives with the family.
Oh, and we can talk about some of this now and some of it when we talk about themes. But I think that there's something real to be said about Wendy as a bit of an annoyance. Like, I don't think that she is not annoying sometimes.
Sure.
And I think I can empathize. Maybe I can empathize with him a little bit, except he just takes it way too far.
And also, if he was working on like the novel of all time, like Paul Sheldon or something, if he's cracking away in there at some actual work, then maybe his frustration, he should probably react differently with his frustration, but you don't always react the way you should.
True.
So if he was really working and if he was really focused on the novel of the century and she's coming in and interrupting him, maybe he might be short with her. But again, we find out that he's just writing
the same thing over and over again.
Yes. So
that is one of the things that the manuscript that's just the same phrase over and over again shows that the collapse of his identity was happening kind of behind the scenes. The thing that he came to do is proof that he can't do anything. He is not a caretaker of his wife and child. He's not a caretaker of this hotel. He is not a writer. He never does any actual caretaking.
The other thing that we're missing in this movie that was in it, from my understanding, is the scrapbook.
Which played a huge role in the book that gives us more insight into how the hotel took over Jack's mind or got Jack on its side.
Right. And so I don't know exactly. I know, and I think there's a couple of shots where you can see it, like on the table in there. But obviously it has no role in the film whatsoever. And I'm guessing that Kubrick cut that to make it more ambiguous because he was really going for ambiguity.
Well, he wins because it's very ambiguous, which is why. But I had a lot of feelings this time around about Jack Torrance, not many of them positive. Let's move on to Wendy. She is the most argued over character in the film. I have a whole page of notes on her. King called her one of the most misogynistic characters ever put on film. I'm not sure that she is. I'm not sure I agree with that take. However, I understand how on first viewing, especially comparing it to the Wendy Torrance from the books, you could see that I think maybe that's a shallow understanding of what misogyny entails. I do think that the relationship between Jack and Wendy is based on him not valuing her as a person or a woman, but I don't know if that's misogynistic or just abusive.
Well, and I think King was a bit butthurt.
Yes.
Over the fact that, and this is not my original idea, I've heard some other people say this, but, Stephen King wrote this at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado when they were basically like snowbound at a hotel and got this idea. So the original Wendy is based more on his wife, I think, because it is, you know, he's sort of the Jack, right?
Right. He was an active alcoholic when he wrote this.
And so to see that character that's supposed to be his wife changed into this more
Passive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that might have contributed to his infamous dislike of this film.
Although in the book, Wendy Torrance is beaten nearly to death with a croquet mallet, and she is saved by Dick Halloran. And in the movie, Wendy saves herself and her son, and Dick Halloran gets an axe to the chest. So in that argument, when you look at those two representations of womanhood and of strength, I think that's a really different. The counter argument, I guess King called her a screaming dish rag. So lovely. That's kind of misogynistic. Counter argument to that, Wendy doesn't actually scream until almost 2 hours into the movie. She locks Jack in the pantry. She slashes his hand. She gets Danny out the bathroom window, and she gets them to safety. One of the things that I wrote, you know, and longtime listeners will know that I get irritated with Barbara from Night of the Living Dead because she kind of just freezes and is totally useless in a crisis. And it's why I am Chill Out Barbara on socials, because I think she needs to chill out. And I don't think that Wendy is a Barbara, even though she's scared. She's terrified. She's lost. She is all alone with her son. She's not strong in the way that sometimes we talked about this in our episode about feminist horror. Like, is it feminist if a woman takes on a bunch of masculine qualities? I think that Shelley Duvall's Wendy Torrance is feminist in a way that does not erase her femininity. She is strong in spite of the fact that she is weaker and alone and at a disadvantage. She is a mother through and through. She defends herself against someone who should have killed her. She should not have survived, and yet she does. And so I wonder, you know, I don't stand on most things I say entirely because I can always see another perspective, but I really like Wendy Torrance a lot in this movie. I like the character a lot.
I think a lot of people just react to her look more than anything.
But her acting too, man, the way that she is in relationship with Jack, the constant kind of bending to him, and Danny does the same thing. And I'm going to talk more about the abuse aspect in a little bit, but it is her look. But I think also as an actor, she did a really great job bringing that to life in all of her interactions. A few other notes that are out there about Wendy. Film scholar Robert Philip Kolker has suggested that the baseball bat scene is representative of Wendy stealing the phallus from Jack, and when she cuts his hand with the knife, that is a symbolic castration. I'm just going to leave you with that. Sometimes we go real deep into movies, and maybe it is. I'm not really sure. It is a great scene, though, when she's so terrified and she's just swinging that bat at him and trying to he's so scary. Oh, he's so scary. And not scary the way that you usually get scared in a haunted house movie, but like scary because like there's real dudes like that out there who do stuff like that, and it's terrifying.
And there's so many iconic shots in this movie, or several, not so many. You had already mentioned the blood elevator, the blood wave.
Yes.
And also, obviously, Jack sticking his face through the door. But I think equally recognizable to that shot is from like the same moment of Wendy sort of cowering in the corner beside the door when she's unable to get out the window.
Oh, terrifying.
Like the shot of sort of the axe coming through the door and her sort of in the corner holding the knife is as recognizable to me as any other shot from this movie.
Yeah. I keep trying to figure out why this movie's scary. And this particular watch for me, it was very much about their relationship. So I wrote in my notes, I feel irritated with Barbara, but protective of Wendy. I can't blame her because it's not all of a sudden. It is the end product of years of abuse. I like her because she's afraid and does it anyway. She's capable even though she's terrified. So yeah, I was a big fan of Wendy, especially this watch. And then the only other thing, Wendy at the very beginning of the movie is reading Catcher in the Rye. And Kubrick, and I knew that was on purpose, and I had to dig into why, but Kubrick deliberately chose that. The parallels between Holden Caulfield's disillusionment and then the film's themes of lost innocence and the loss of kind of regularity. There's a lot of talk about he's just a regular guy in this movie. And so Holden Caulfield, of course, is, breaks away from the regular guy. And it also is part of the heavy Americana pattern where we've got a lot of red, white, and blue clothing, U.S. flags, the Apollo 11 sweater, those kinds of things.
Well, and also, what year was... So it was later in the release year that John Lennon was murdered.
Oh.
He was murdered or assassinated on December 8th, 1980. But his assassin, Mark David Chapman, very famously was sitting there reading Catcher in the Rye when the police showed up. So.
Right. The choice of that book definitely feeds some of those Room 237 conspiracy theories.
Faux show.
Let's move on to Danny Torrance.
Do you know why they ended up changing it to Room 30?
Nope.
237, boss.
I don't know. I know I saw something and I can't remember.
I won't remember it if we don't say it here, so forgive my short tangent.
No problem.
Because they were, using the exterior shots of the Timberline Lodge, I think it was the Timberline Lodge's manager who called Kubrick and was basically like, we're already getting calls about this movie, blah, blah, blah. I think it was before it even, before they had started production on it.
Yep.
And was like, if you call it Room 217, which it is in the book, right?
I don't remember.
I think it's...
But yes, it was changed from 217 to 237.
He was like, nobody's ever going to stay in our Room 217.
Right.
Which is completely bonkers. Everybody would want to stay in that room.
100%.
But he was like, can you change it to one of these room numbers?
That don't exist.
237 was one of them.
Interesting. I did see that and I had that in my notes and I didn't know where to bring it up. But yeah, that's great. We've got Danny Torrance and Tony. The Shine, Danny's psychic ability, is more ambiguous in the film than the novel. This is a running theme. Is it a real psychic ability or is it a traumatized child processing what he already knows about his family? I think that obviously there is some paranormal stuff going on. I think that's not ambiguous, but there is enough of it that you could start to be like, oh, has this kid split? Has his personality split? Tony could very easily be a dissociative alter in the film. In the book, Tony is a future version of Danny talking to himself. And Kubrick took that out entirely. It's just a little guy who is inside of him, which is really terrifying. I had a tough time watching when Tony completely takes over and Wendy is in the room alone with just Tony and she's like hugging Danny and being like, oh, baby. I really resonated with that really hard this time as a mother of a child. And the thought of like when you lose your child to illness or to some sort of mental break like that, the sadness in Wendy's face really, really got me that time. That hit me pretty viscerally. Danny was hurt by his father. Again, it's ambiguous. Wendy tells the story like, oh, Jack just, broke his shoulder. No big deal. It happens to everyone. And we can tell that's not true. But Danny knows how to be quiet, right? Like when he wants to go get his fire truck and he's like tiptoeing up to the room. And I wrote down, abused kids know how to be quiet. His silence and his compliance is about survival. When you have an alcoholic parent who is unpredictable, you learn very quickly how to be quiet and how to kind of stay out of the way. There's only one time that we see Jack hug Danny and be affectionate, and it's in that scene where he wakes up and sees Danny and then he like grabs him and it's very uncomfortable. It seems like Danny does not want to be hugged, but Danny still kind of bends himself for his father's need. He's like, do you like it here, Daddy? He's like, yeah, don't you? He's like, sure. And then Jack uses the same phrasing that the Grady girls use, stay here forever and ever and ever. And the hotel is recruiting Danny the same way it recruited Jack. In the book, the hotel wants Danny because of his shine. The whole reason it's called The Shining is because the hotel wants Danny to die there so it can have his gift. That is not the obvious motivation to me in the movie. That Danny, I can't tell if the hotel just wants Danny dead because it can see because it wants Jack, and so to get Jack, it needs to kill the whole family so that it can have Jack. I'm not sure.
I also think Jack shines in the movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he sees the visions.
He does see the visions. He also does in the book.
But also, Danny also can tap into what's happening with his father, even from a distance, like earlier in the movie when he knows ahead of time that his dad got the job and that he was going to be calling in a few minutes.
Yep.
So, who knows?
Yeah, really, really interesting, though. Yeah, when Jack says to Danny, I love you more than anything else in the whole world, it's a perfectly normal thing for a dad to say, but it's super creepy because we already know who he is, right? It's like, just so creepy. Danny isn't here, Mrs. Torrance. That was Danny Lloyd's voice doing Tony's rasping voice. It did remind me of The Exorcist once Danny was kind of in Tony mode, just because Danny wasn't there anymore, and then the change voice. That's why I was like, oh, I wonder if it's a different voice like it was in The Exorcist. But no, it was Danny's voice.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere where Danny Lloyd, the actor, said that they told him to do the finger part, but he was like, but I made up the voices myself.
So cool. Must be cool to have him as a teacher. And I also wrote at the very end, the last scene in the maze, being slow and careful when you're terrified like Danny is amazing. Like when he starts backtracking in his tracks, you're like, oh my goodness, what a smart little kid. Like very smart at such a young age. And it connects to what makes Danny's escape so satisfying versus other film climaxes. Like Danny gets himself out by being smart, even though that all odds say that he should have either frozen to death or Jack would have caught him or whatever. So Danny's a really cool character and is played very, very well by Danny Lloyd. We've got Dick Halloran. He's the only other character who shines, unless we count Jack. He and Danny recognize each other immediately. The scene between Halloran and Danny in the kitchen is just so lovely, although we talked a little bit last week about how strenuous it was. Huge differences in this character versus the novelization. In Kubrick's film, he flies across the country and is axed in the chest the moment he walks through the door. Now, there is a racial dimension here. The one black character comes to save the white family and is immediately killed. And there are some theories that we'll talk about that say that some of this, there's a Native American theory about Native American genocide, and the fact that a black character is killed plays into that. I'm not really sure.
To be fair, anybody who showed up in that moment was going to get killed.
Also true. Also true. There was an article by Blakemore in, I think, the New Yorker. I have it later in my notes. But Halloran, when he dies, he falls across a large Native American design on the floor, which he says is a deliberate visual link between two forms of racist violence, which Leon Vitali has said that's not the case at all. And Kubrick never responded to that article about the Native American violence and the racialization. So we don't really have any insight into that from an intention perspective. But I think it's important to notice as we're looking at the history of film. In my notes, I'm still so mad about Halloran getting killed. I am very mad about it. I love that character in the book and in the movie. The other thing I wanted to say about this character, first time that we've watched this movie since we watched It, Welcome to Derry, which is a prequel series, and there is a crossover in the novel that Dick Halloran is one of the people who opens the Black Spot in Derry, and so that we have a young Dick Halloran in that series.
True story. My only question is if he shines so good, which we know he does.
Yes.
And has such an impeccable taste in art. Oh wait, that was my own side note. I guess that was like a well-known artist in the culture who I don't have notes on that, but
I don't either. I did notice that about his room though. The beautiful naked ladies in Dick Halloran's.
It's a sweet bachelor pad in Miami.
Oh my goodness, the sweetest bachelor pad, and dude's like in his 70s.
But if you were going to travel halfway across the country, drive through a snowstorm based on your intuition that some terrible shit was about to go down, like, bring a weapon.
Yeah, not a great move. It's so abrupt. His death in the movie is so abrupt. And I'm sure Kubrick reveled in that. Like that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like
no, it's effective to me.
incredibly effective, but also like, oh no, that was he made it through so much and then just gets axed.
Like, I'm sure they could have shot like a cool fight scene or something between Jack and Halloran, but that would have diminished it. I feel like it would be less impactful. His death.
Oh yeah, no, his death is hugely impactful, and he still saved Danny and Wendy because he brought the snowcat that they then take down the mountain. So he still saved them even after his death. I did promise you I had a section on the Overlook Hotel as a character. We've talked about how the sets were deliberately spatially impossible, that the rooms and the corridors can't logically exist, that was a choice. Leon Vitali is the one who said all of that blood pouring out of the elevator told a little bit about the hotel becoming a character itself. And it is personified in Delbert Grady, the caretaker. In that Simon interview, Kubrick said, "The Overlook is a malevolent place with the power to bring out the worst in people and to make them instruments of its evil purposes." It does sit on a Native American burial ground, which is mentioned at the very beginning, which leads to people noticing the themes of buried history and cyclical violence. I wrote, the book is about the hotel wanting Danny and using Jack to get him. The movie is about Jack going crazy and the hotel wanting Jack. So that's where I come down on it. We've got Lloyd the bartender and Delbert Grady, who are both personifications of the hotel. Lloyd, played by Joe Turkel, he's the hotel's kind of first voice of recruitment when Jack goes in there and gets the booze. Grady, presented as a formal English butler, he's called Charles Grady in the opening interview, and then Delbert Grady as a ghost. No reason, deliberate ambiguity once again. The characters function as the hotel's voice. They don't haunt, they recruit, which is very different from a lot of psychological or haunted house movies that we've seen. Grady's accent disappears in the bathroom. He loses a little bit of that charming English butler. And then we both looked at each other. When Grady spills on Jack, he spills advocaat. It is a Dutch egg liqueur, like a boozy custard eggnog made from eggs, sugar, and brandy. Very popular in the 20s and again in the 70s and 80s. And so the drink that Jack ends up holding is a bourbon and advocaat, now sometimes called the Jack Torrance. So that's a nice little trivia bit for you.
And he also gets it all over Grady's back, too. Did you see that? Jack pats Grady's back, and it goes all over his back.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Like a little detail in there.
Ah. We've got Stuart Ullman and Bill Watson, who are the like people at the beginning of the movie, the hotel manager, I guess, who does Jack's interview. Jack is in conversation with them and positions Wendy as like the kind of kooky one. She's a confirmed ghost story and horror film addict in that conversation with Stuart Ullman, who also tells him all of this horrible stuff about the hotel. Like, oh, the last guy killed his wife and kids. You cool? And he's like, yeah, I'm cool. And Bill Watson is there, but almost entirely silent. And then Wendy is crossfaded with Watson, suggesting that she, not Jack, is the real caretaker of the family, which is true because she's the one who ends up like doing the maintenance on the place, even though that was Jack's job. The Grady twins, they are not twins in the novel. They are described as sisters, roughly ages 8 and 10 in the book, but Kubrick cast identical twins, Lisa and Louise Burns. They had a hard time getting other acting work after doing this film. Lisa became a lawyer, and Louise pursued science. So, should have mentioned that earlier in our casting section. But the staging resembles Diane Arbus's identical twins, Roselle, New Jersey. And Kubrick studied photography under Arbus. His widow says it was not a deliberate call out to that, but seems like there might have been something, even if it was subconscious, and the way that the twins are shown. But who's your favorite character?
I probably have to go with Danny. Did I steal yours?
No.
Oh, yeah. And he's great.
That's cool. Mine's Wendy this time around.
Nice.
Big Wendy fan. And do you have a favorite quote?
I really like it in the bar scene. You know, the first time that Jack saddles up to the barn. Is it saddles up?
Sidles?
Sidles up to the barn. That sidle's not a word.
S-I-D-L-E?
It's got to be saddle like you're riding a horse.
No way.
You got to saddle on to the bar.
If only there was a computer somewhere nearby where I could look this up.
I know she's right, but she's looking it up anyway.
So you're trolling me, as the children say.
Yeah, clearly. I do it constantly.
I'm so bad at this. You have to sidle up to a horse to saddle it.
Whoa.
Take that.
We should just end the show there. So obviously he's either seeing things or we don't know exactly what's going on, but he's talking to a bartender that nobody else can see. And he's drinking booze that may or may not be there. It's probably not there, but it has the same effect on him. But then Wendy comes running in, completely upset for good reasons. Danny's all bruised up, and at first she thought it was Jack, but now she's figured out it wasn't Jack. Good news.
Great news.
Jack should be like, I told you it wasn't me, but she's like, it was a lady, an old lady in room 237, blah, 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 blah. And Jack just looks at her and goes, are you out of your fucking mind?
Pretty
It's
good.
just the context of it I love.
My favorite quote was also a Jack line. It is, Wendy, darling, light of my life, I'm just going to bash your brain. I'm not going to kill you. I'm just going to bash your brains in. Right?
I'm not going to kill you. I'm just going to bash your brain.
Yeah, you do a much better. I don't do Jack Torrance, but you do great.
I get the energy, not really the voice.
That's all I got for characters, man. Let's check out some Murder Mayhem.
Yes. So I found a way to make a really long Murder Mayhem section for a movie that, if you count the Grady family, only has like 6 deaths in it. I'm going to maybe just kind of bang through it quickly.
Go for it.
One really interesting thing, this movie's divided into chapters, right? But sort of haphazardly. It's like crazy. And it kind of works like the ticking clock thing that people do in a story. Like at first it's kind of vague, but then it sort of like gets into smaller increments of time. And if I've done this correctly, there's the interview, closing day, a month later, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, 8 a.m., and then 4 p.m., right? Is that?
I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but that sounds right.
And like I said, if you count the Grady family, there's about 6 deaths in this film. We see 4 bodies, including the sort of visions of the 2 twins. But for this, I sort of included all of the weird stuff as it transpires throughout the movie. I'm just going to go quick and you can let me know, or you can jump in wherever. But first of all, the opening credit sequence is weird. As they're driving through the mountains, there's like the blue font credits that are scrolling up, which, of course, the credits at the end of a film roll up, right? But it seems just so strange at the beginning to see credits like that. And I don't know if that's intentionally part of the unease, but it definitely starts. It's just strange, and you don't see that very often. Then in the interview, Ullman references the Grady murders. So that's where we get the first idea that there's something up here. While that's going on, Danny has his first vision from Tony, which it's early in the movie. I'm surprised by it every time I see it, that they show the blood from the elevator that early on, but he also sees the twins. Then on closing day, which is the first day that the Torrance family arrives, as everybody else is packing up to go. They're arriving, getting the tour. It's the first time Danny sees the twins, and he sees them in the game room. And I would not be stoked about that. I just got done Asteroid. Like, I'm a cozy kid in the late 70s. Like, leave me alone, ladies. Shortly after that, we have the very first shine between Dick and Danny. And that's when, very impressively, Dick Halloran is talking to Wendy, but then communicates with Danny about ice cream. Like, I can hardly, like, talk to you and look at my phone at the same time, but Dick can carry on audible conversation and a mental conversation separately. Then in the Tuesday chapter, Danny has a new vision of the twins as he's parked outside of room 237 for the first time. That's the time when he goes up to the door and it's locked. He can't get in. But as he's trying to enter the room, that vision of the twins pops up in his head again. Then on Saturday, Danny sees the twins while on the big wheel. And that's sort of the big famous scene of the twins at the end of the hallway. And that's when they invite him to come play with them forever and ever and ever. And this vision, which you said that you missed, was interspliced with shots of the twins. The hallway's completely bloody. Their bodies are like there and just all the puddles of blood and everything. Pretty unnerving. Not long after that, Danny shows up with the bruising on his neck. After seeing a bit later on, he comes back. We see that 237 is now open with the key in the door. He shows up in the Colorado lounge where his parents are sort of arguing already, because Jack had just woken up from his nightmares, and where he said that, I had a nightmare that I killed you and I killed Danny, and Danny shows up with the bruise on his neck, and Wendy, it's probably not far-fetched for her to think.
What else would you expect?
Yeah, exactly. So next is when Jack shows up in the gold room and sits down at the bar and meets Lloyd for the first time. So we now have a walking, talking apparition of some sort. Is it just in Jack's head? Or is he really a ghost in the bar? Either way, pretty convenient if you're looking for a drink. And it's at that time that Jack said he would sell his soul for a beer. And all of a sudden, the booze all appears. So there are some theories out there that he sold his soul to the devil, and so that there's that aspect incorporated here as well. And Jack drinks and all of that. Meanwhile, Dick Halloran's enjoying his time in Florida among his paintings and the warm winter weather of Florida. And he starts to, you can see when he's lying in bed, Dick Halloran is starting to get a vision. And that's sort of interspliced with Danny like trembling and drooling. You're kind of like, what's going on? While that's happening between Dick and Danny, that is when Jack visits room 237. Very famous scene. You got a lovely lady taking a bath, as one does. She's a very beautiful woman. Gets out of the bathtub, approaches Jack. Jack's like, this is the best hotel I've ever stayed at. He starts embracing her, kissing her, and then suddenly we can hear in the music, things have changed. And indeed, she is turned into a very scary, hideous woman who comes at Jack, who retreats from the room. Now, Danny's also having some visions of the word red rum in bed, while Jack is gaslighting Wendy about room 237, because he comes back from that. He's like, I didn't see anything. You're crazy. Like, there was nothing there. No big deal. But even though that was originally the reason why he didn't do it, so I would have been like, yeah, there was tons of stuff in there. So there's another visit by Jack to the gold room, but this time there is a shindig going on. Looks like fun and a half in there. And there was some of that scene in the behind the scenes of just all the extras practicing their dancing and then getting in costume and all of that. It must have been, I mean, I know it was intense, but to be an extra on that would have been pretty sweet. It's that scene that leads to Jack getting covered in the drink, then we find out that, the butler's Grady and Jack was there all along, all of that, however you want to interpret it. And so Jack is becoming more and more unhinged, and he's coming after his family now, as after his conversation with Grady in the bathroom, you need to take care of that situation. And Jack promises that he will. So he's going after poor Wendy up the stairs. She's got her bat. She's well prepared, much better prepared than Dick Halloran will be here in a few scenes. But she finally takes a swing at Jack, knocks him out. He falls down the stairs. I don't know who the stunt person was for that, but they did an amazing job. Because I rewatched that scene, and somebody just takes a tumble down those stairs. After she knocks him out, then it cuts to this great shot of him being dragged through the kitchen, and she puts him in dry storage. Is that what we're calling that, dry storage?
I guess so.
It's not the cold. It's not warm. It's all I don't know.
It's the dry goods, yeah.
The dry goods, except for the wet stuff. That's
it's the pantry.
Pantry's
probably the best.
Then she's taking a nap because that's a lot to deal with. Or she's in bed. I don't know if it's sleep or nap or what. And that's when Danny has what I've called his red rum fit. He writes on the door with the lipstick. We find out then that he was the one who wrote red rum on the door. The red rum he's seeing in his visions, he actually wrote it, right? And he starts screeching, red rum, red rum. That was better than I thought it was going to be.
It's pretty good, actually. It kind of made me very uncomfortable.
And he's holding a knife, right? Had he grabbed a knife? He was holding a knife when he was saying that?
Because his mom had the knife in the room.
And he grabbed it off the bedside table or something?
Yes.
And she wakes up and she sees in the mirror that it says that red rum is actually murder, which we all know now just from this movie.
Yeah.
So Jack continues. He's coming after his family with the axe because he's been somehow let out. That's like the one part of the movie that they said that they sort of reserved themselves to like kind of a inconsistency. It's less ambiguous than they wanted it to be, because that really clearly indicates that there's a supernatural force, right? That he gets let out of the storage.
Yeah, that's like a physical proof that there's something else there with them.
So, and I don't think they necessarily wanted any physical proof, but in terms of getting the story to where they needed it to be, that's what happened. He starts coming after his family with an axe. Wendy and Danny try to get out of the bathroom window of their apartment, and Danny successfully gets out, but Wendy not so much. So Jack starts breaking down the door, and we talked about that scene. Was it one door? Was it 60 doors? We know it was a real door. That's all we really know. While he's trying to do that, Wendy cuts him with a knife, and while all this is happening, everyone hears a snowcat approaching. And as we know, as the viewers, Dick Halloran has been trekking up from Miami. He found a snowcat to get him up to the Overlook Hotel through this brutal storm, and everybody hears him coming, and that kind of changes the feel of everything, right? Wendy feels like there's hope. Jack feels like there's danger.
Yep.
Jack goes after whoever's here on the snowcat. He's actually been told by Grady in the bathroom who's here, right?
Yeah, he was told by Grady.
And
in language that you would not use in a movie today.
No. Jack goes off to confront Dick. Wendy uses that time to try to find Danny. She's running through the hotel, and that's when she catches sight of the old bear dog BJ, is what I call it in my notes. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If you do, I don't know what else to call it. Just one of those crazy things to have the hotel messing with Wendy's mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now the hotel is working in tandem with Jack, essentially, to try to help get rid of his family. So through this, she's starting to see more visions, including a party-goer ghost with a bloody head. And then she goes into one of the rooms that looks like the room has aged a bajillion years. It's just covered in cobwebs and skeletons. And then she herself witnesses the blood wave coming out of the elevator. Jack, at this point, he's chased Danny out into the maze. As Rachel already stated, Danny was able to elude his father by some footprint trickery, another band name I'm working on, and Jack freezes in the maze, just like Stanley Kubrick on a Saturday morning. He couldn't find his way out, but the conditions were not such that he could survive the stay overnight. And of course, the movie closes on an old-timey photo, a nice long zoom on the photo and photo wall of the Overlook Hotel, July 4th ball, 1921, which standing prominently front and center was caretaker Jack Torrance, Charles Grady, Delbert Grady. I don't know, but either way, it's definitely Jack Nicholson.
Definitely.
So that's how I dealt with murder mayhem in this movie. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah, and it is. I like the way that you use the ghostly or the hotel's kind of interactions as the mayhem. There's so many themes, and I'm not going to hit them all, but we're going to hit some of them. So, King's version, moral story: Jack is a man who could have chosen differently. And the horror is about the choices that he makes. And in Kubrick's version, it's kind of a fatalist story. The hotel recognized what's there and removes the last restraint. So the horror is about the fact that Jack was kind of doomed to this from the beginning. And so whether you look at the story through that this was a choice that Jack made or whether this was always going to be this way, I think changes every theme that we're going to talk about. So I think it's important to talk about that at the beginning. Addiction and alcoholism. Jack arrives 3 years sober. He's not recovered, but he is contained anyway. And again, King wrote the novel when he was in active alcoholism. He said that he was up to a case of beer a night. And so this was real. And he was in a hotel during a snowstorm. So very autobiographical.
Was it 3 years in the movie? I thought it was like 5 months or something.
I think it was 5 months since he left his job.
Oh, okay.
But I thought it was 3 years sober.
We don't have to be correct.
We don't have to be correct. Yeah, the alcoholism, some of that is taken away in the UK cut because it takes away that scene between Danny and Wendy and the doctor. And so that drinking, which kind of makes it more supernatural, like there's less of the alcoholism in the UK cut. In the gold room scene, the drink is already poured. The hotel functions the way a drink functions. It's not the source of the monster, but it is the permission that Jack needs, right? So the hotel doesn't make him bad, but it gives him permission. And it reminds me of that saying from recovery that I am familiar with. First, the man takes the drink, and then the drink takes the first drink. The man takes the first drink, and then the second drink takes the man. And so when Jack makes the choice to have the drink, after that, the drink has him, which I thought was really interesting. I noticed a lot of the children of alcoholic behavior in Danny, right? Like the being quiet and all of that. Nicholson made a very compelling and very real alcoholic father. Like even if you forgot about all the psychological stuff, the stuff that it's really, really intense. And it kind of overlaps with the family violence and domestic abuse theme in here. Before the movie starts, a drunk Jack has dislocated Danny's arm, which Wendy has just kind of like justified away, which often happens in abusive families, especially she plays an abused woman so well. And if you believe that she wasn't abused before she got to the Overlook, I have a hard time believing that. I think that the way that she tells the doctor when she's got this rehearsed neutrality where she's excusing Jack's behavior. The doctor is clearly troubled. Also, did you notice Wendy offered the doctor a cigarette? Can you imagine? Here, doctor, would you like a smoke? Wendy's not bothered by it. She's living in her own, and many people who've been in abusive relationships, primarily it's majority women, not that men cannot be in these relationships, but women who are in abusive relationships don't notice it because it's kind of death by a thousand cuts, and then all of a sudden you're in it. And I think Wendy is a great example of this. She feels like Jack's behavior is normal because it has become normalized. Even when she talks about Danny's injury, she says, then he had an injury. She uses the passive construction. She doesn't say Jack injured him. She says he had an injury. So even her language, it's one of the things I use with my writing students is that like the way that we say something can tell us about the thing as much as what we say. And so the fact that she's using that really hit me as tying in with this kind of abused woman. This film is not about a man who suddenly becomes violent. It's a family that's already built an architecture of being normal around the alcoholic, violent person at the center of it, which is why when Danny says, oh, I know how to be quiet, Mom, don't worry. Because of course he knows how to be quiet, because if he's not, he's gonna get it. Jack is belittling about his wife from scene one. There's not a lot of chemistry between them. Like she's very childlike and easily controlled and mouse-like, as Kubrick was looking for. And often abusers will look for someone who needs that kind of, someone who is malleable, someone who is controllable, easily controllable. And Wendy enables him and continues to kind of make excuses for him because that's what she's been doing for years. That's something that has become a part of their relationship and their family. So the Overlook, this is interesting. I thought the Overlook doesn't introduce violence. It removes the outside world, which is what was keeping the violence inside its box. And when you take that away and you add the isolation, it kind of releases the violence that was already in him. There is one point that this is just my speculation. I didn't find anything else about this, but do you remember the news report when Wendy's watching TV and there's a report about a woman who went missing while hunting with her husband? And I know there's been many real world cases about women who are killed by their husbands on hiking or hunting trips because it's a very easy, they're all alone. No one's there to watch. Oh no, oops, my gun. And so I had written, is this put here deliberately to kind of show us like the danger of a woman being isolated with a man, or is it just atmosphere? I don't know. I couldn't find anything, but I thought it was interesting while thinking about this theme. In King's version, domestic abuse is a moral failing of Jack. And in Kubrick's version, it's kind of just impersonal. This is just who Jack is. There's no, and Jack is that way no matter what. It's also important to note that this film was released in 1980, which is the moment when there was more public awareness of domestic violence as a social issue. So it's not incidental. I think it's important that we look at media at the time when it came out, because that's going to impact the way it was received then and also now. And I think now there's a lot more understanding of domestic violence and of what it looks like. And I think this movie is really, really obvious to me, but I don't know. And we talked about that when we talked about Reception last week. Like, some people thought it was really unrealistic. And I was like, that is so realistic. I've known a lot of people who've been in abusive relationships, and it is very realistic that they would stay with it. So psychological versus supernatural ambiguity. We've talked about this a lot already, so I'll try to skim over this. The film doesn't resolve it. And I was wondering why this movie feels so different from other haunted house movies. This is a haunted house movie, but it doesn't feel that way to me at all. This feels far more like a psychological thriller. And I wrote in my notes, how much is this movie responsible for our understanding of hauntings? When we have Dick explaining to Danny, it's like when toast gets burnt and a place has like this leftovers of what happened here. I think that's a pretty common understanding of what a haunting is. But this also feels different than other haunted house movies. And maybe it's because the ghosts aren't the dangerous part. Maybe it's because, I don't know. I don't know if you have any insight into that, to this as a haunted house movie, the supernatural aspect of it, and maybe the impact on horror overall.
Well, I think a big part of it is that it's largely daylight in a lot of the scenes.
Great call.
Especially when the haunting stuff is happening, and also because it's in a hotel and not in a house. The hotel's always like pretty brightly lit, the hallways and stuff like that, as opposed to what we're used to in a lot of haunted house movies where the horror happens in the dark. This is like happening right in plain sight. That
is a vibes answer, and it totally tracks. You're right. It is. It's a huge vibes piece. Maybe that's because it's about how it feels, right? Like that it's about the lighting. Of course it is. That makes so much sense. And we've talked about ambiguity this whole time, so I'm not going to belabor that fact. But we've got plenty of evidence that this is supernatural, that this is a haunting. There is also evidence that this could be a psychological. Every supernatural event other than escaping from the pantry can be accounted for by Jack's deteriorating mind or Danny's vivid imagination. Like a traumatic child imagining things combined with two unreliable narrators, and the only thing that doesn't track is him getting out of that pantry. But you could still make an argument that he, found a broken hinge or something. And then the photo at the end could be read as the hotel's mythology absorbing a broken man, not literal reincarnation. I mean, I think the supernatural case is pretty overwhelmingly there, but I think there's enough of the psychological case if you had to either or it that you could. And they're both terrifying. If the hotel is evil, that's terrifying. And if it's all Jack, that's terrifying for very different reasons. There's so much here. There's cyclical violence and buried history. Ullman talks about the hotel's body count with almost no emotion at the beginning. Each winter there's a caretaker, same pattern, different man. You've always been the caretaker, which we called out in our intro today, not necessarily literal reincarnation, but recognition that Jack is a type and that type has always been there, and the hotel pulls that type to itself. In terms of cyclical violence and buried history, the whole setting of the hotel on a Native American burial ground, literal buried history. There's also a lot of, again, the Blakemore thesis. I'm going to let you guys look into this. I'm going to link this in the show notes, but it was a 1987 Washington Post essay. It wasn't the Times. But he claims that the film is a sustained metaphor for the genocide of Native Americans and America's inability to confront it. So looking at the Native American motifs, the Overlook, Halloran's body at the end. Film historian Jeffrey Cox says the blood elevator represents the blood of genocide. So that's there. Leon Vitali has said Room 237 was pure gibberish and that the genocide theory was something Kubrick would have dismissed. So I don't know how much of that is there, but it's an interesting take And then the question, I think, is, does intentionality matter? We ask that question a lot. If the director intended it or not, we can still talk about it and have a good conversation about it.
I mean, I think a lot of art is created in the subconscious. And like, I think there's, in all forms of art, whether we're talking about a song or a movie or a TV show or a painting or, you know what pieces of art are. But, the person creates it. As an artist myself, a musician and songwriter, I rarely, and I'm not talking about necessarily writing songs for this show, but like when I'm writing just expressive songs of my own, I'm not necessarily going in being like, what are the themes going to be of my song? Like, what is, maybe I'm talking about one thing. And then when you go back and look at it, whether it's me looking at it or it's some other listener listening to it, there's so many things that you can extract when you then go back to it. You might write something profoundly deep, or a filmmaker might make a movie that has much more profound dimensions to it than were initially intended. And so I think that most pieces of art you can really draw a lot from. I definitely think Kubrick had more on his mind in a lot of his process, but I think you're right that, it's up to the viewer, and that's what's awesome about art. So when people are hating each other and yelling at each other online, that's why
so much.
So dumb, because like a lot of times there is no right answer. Let's just say, yes, it's all there.
I love that. And I think for me, songwriting has often felt much more like a conduit than a creative process, where I kind of like open the floodgates, like I'm turning on a faucet and then the song just comes. But you have to like get your way in there. But then once it starts to come out, it just comes, and I don't know where it comes from. And I wonder, and I imagine that a lot of art is like that I'm same deal, right? Like not planning on it, not thinking about it, just kind of letting it come out. And then once it does, and yeah, shaped by the subconscious, I think is a really beautiful way to say it. That was really well said, sir. Nice job. One more theme for you. There's more, but we're just going to do one more. Isolation and the collapse of identity. The Overlook's power isn't really the ghosts. It's what happens when you remove every external structure, giving a person's life definition. So Jack is a failed academic. He's a failed writer. He's a recovering alcoholic. He has no sense of success. When he's talking to Wendy about going back and talks about, what do you want me to do? Go work at a car wash? Like, go do some bullshit? Like, I'm a writer. This is what I'm supposed to do, right? Like, his sense of self is so tied to what he is able to accomplish and achieve. Very American, very Western. The manuscript becomes proof that he can't do the one thing that he came to do. The hotel gives him purpose. The hotel gives him a center. Wendy is isolated within the relationship. The hotel just makes that literal. And of course, Danny is isolated by knowing what's going on all around him. Nobody's listening, and he has learned to dissociate, which is a very common response to trauma and very common for a child who's been abused. So looking at the movie through the lens of isolation and the loss of identity, the loss of self, I think gives us another way into some of those deeper subconscious meanings, perhaps. But that's all I have. All I have with air quotes. Yeah, plenty in there, but The Shining gives us so much to think about. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. And it's pretty amazing that we're now at the open mic portion of our show.
Wow.
And our gimmick for this week was 1 minute window.
Yeah.
Where each of us had to pick 1 minute from the film and write our film. Nope, we're not writing a film. No time for that. We had to write our song based on that 1 minute. And I know we had a lot of fun with this, or at least I did back when we did it for Black Christmas. And
yes,
same this time around. Anxious to see if you picked the same 1 minute. There were a lot of minutes in this movie to pick from, so I think it's highly unlikely, but
I don't know. It's pretty tricky. I have no idea what you picked, so I'm excited to hear.
Time will tell, but let's get everything set up and move into the open mic.
Sounds good.
Ladies and gents, we proudly present
For your listening delights,
this week's open mic.
All right. So it took me many minutes to pick my minute because I had to find the exact minute. But my minute for this song is it's very early on in the film. It's from the scene titled The Interview, from 8 minutes and 7 seconds to 9 minutes and 7 seconds. And it starts when he says, this is the part where the manager of the hotel tells Jack about the previous caretaker, about Grady, who has 2 names, which we talked about. But he says so it starts right where he says, before I turn you over to this guy to go look at the rest of it, I want to tell you about the tragedy that happened 10 years ago. And he explains that there was his predecessor named Charles Grady, that he was a good employment record. And this is the line that made me pick this minute. And I noted this when we were watching it. I said, he seemed like a completely normal individual. And so this song is called Completely Normal Individual, and it is inspired by the scene in The Interview when the manager is telling Jack about the former caretaker.
Nice.
I swear there is no melodrama, still there is some lingering trauma, like after someone burns the toast. Tragedy can leave its ghosts, still I bet you'll be fine after all. And you seem like a nice guy after all. You come from good stock, yeah, he talked a good talk, had a clean record, of course we checked. Such a nice family, such a shame it ended badly. He was a completely normal individual. Seemed like a completely normal individual. This place can get a little lonely when you are the one and only, looking at the same damn places and always at the same damn faces. Still I'm sure you'll be fine after all. You're just an ordinary guy after all. Yeah, he came from good stock and he talked a good talk, had a clean record, of course we checked. Such a nice family, such a shame it ended badly. He was a completely normal individual. Seemed like a completely normal individual. When you're alone, so far from home, it must have been like a dream. Such lousy luck, and he ran amok. Can you imagine the scene? But you come from good stock, yeah, you talk a good talk, got a clean record, of course we checked. And you've got such a nice family, I'm sure it won't end so badly. You're a completely normal individual. Seem like a completely normal individual.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't play it as well as I wanted to, and that the dog thinks we're talking to somebody without him, and he's barking. So the bridge needs a little bit of work, but I actually really liked how this turned out. It was tough to grab it, but I also, when I was writing this, I remembered way back, maybe 15, 18 years ago, when I was recording my music for the first time. And I had someone who played fiddle, actually, on some of my songs years and years and years ago. And he came in and he said, you sound like a lot of musical theater inspiration. And I was surprised because I did a fair amount of musical theater, if you couldn't tell. This song definitely has some musical theater vibes to it. But yeah, I was pretty happy with this one.
No, I like it. It's nice. It's cheeky.
Yeah.
And it's very innocent sounding, which with the underlying, knowledge that there's more trouble than we're bargaining for. right?
Yeah, and I think that was part of, and that was a theme that ran throughout the film for me, both while watching it and then also while researching it, is that is the contrast. This totally normal guy, supposedly from the surface, but is not underneath, right? And then the question that we talked a lot about, did the hotel turn Jack, or was Jack always this not normal person that the hotel just found and drew to him? Like, was Grady normal or not? But I just remember when we watched the movie this time, that line stuck out to me, ordinary, normal individual. And so that was the one that I wanted to write about. So I'm really happy with how that turned out. I don't know if we'll be doing a demo of it, but even if we don't, I'd love to maybe tighten it up a little bit someday, when we get a chance.
Well, we'll find out in a week or so.
That's true. We haven't decided yet. And I haven't heard your song yet. So I'm psyched about that. Shall we mix it up?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. We got me set up. I actually had picked a different scene to start with. I was kind of thinking of doing the scene where Wendy is on the radio sort of earlier on in their stay. Right before the snowstorm, she's talking to the guy at the Forest Service. And it's like the only time she kind of seems happy while they're there. She's having like a regular interaction with another human being that's not surrounded by dread. But I couldn't really figure out how to make that a song as easily in my head when I realized where I wanted to go, which was the scene starting at, I don't know the name of the scene like you do, but starting at 1 hour and 4 minutes and I think 3 seconds on the 4K disc is the time we're looking at. That's the version we used. And that's when Jack sidles up to the bar and summons his demon, Lloyd, which we didn't really talk about, sort of that potential angle when he says, anything for a drink, I'd give my goddamn soul. So yeah, and I'm not sure, I've had several titles for this. The idea originally sprung in my head as Rock or Rock Bottom. If I was naming this like I would conventionally name one of my songs, it would probably be called My Most Rock Bottom, but I kind of like the name Jack on the Rocks.
Anything for a drink, I'd give my goddamn soul. For a Jack on the rocks, if this is my hand then I fold. Now I've got nothing left, should I blame this place? I've been so tormented, recognize my face. Will I summon my demons, my little secrets? They're always creeping. And I could have been your rock. Now that they're unlocked, you'll see what I've got. I know I could have fought 'em. You're getting me most rock bottom. And now I'm on my own, and I don't want to drop it. You should probably go, 'cause I don't know how to stop it. And I summon my demons, my little secrets, they're always creeping. And I could have been your rock. Now that they're unlocked, you see what I've got. I know I could have fought 'em, but you're getting me at my most rock bottom. Staring my own fate in the eyes, and hiding underneath all these lies. It's tearing me up from the inside. I'm starting to think I will make it out alive. I summon my demons, my little secrets, they're always creeping. And I could have been your rock, but now that they're unlocked, you'll see what I've got. I know I could have fought 'em. You're getting me, and my most rock bottom, getting me, and my most rock bottom.
And we leave it unresolved with Ted screaming into the...
I love the instrumental going into the bridge. That got me. And then the end where it kind of like built up. Really, really liked that part too. Man, so great. Your guitar playing always just like wraps me up in a nice warm blanket. It's so rich and there's so many layers. I really liked that. And I love the different titles. I don't know which one is a good one. I see what you mean though.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. But yeah, that was great. Oh, how much fun.
Well,
and such a great scene. I mean, again, we could talk about any scene, as we've just shown, from this movie has got so much that we could unpack and unwrap and unravel. Yeah, I think we nailed it. I like the 60-minute window gimmick.
60-second?
Yep, that's what I said. Come on. Yes, the 60-second, the 1-minute window, it's tricky. It is much more limiting than some of our other songwriting gimmicks. But because of that, it really makes you think about everything that is in a minute, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, great job, us.
Well, thank you, love. And I think we're losing light.
I believe we might be.
All right, let's wrap up this shenanigans.
Let's do it.
All right, we're losing light.
That we are.
What a journey it has been discussing The Shining, and I'm grateful we split it into 2 episodes.
Me too. I don't know how we would have even tried to put it in one.
But should we find out what our next deep dive is going to be?
Yes.
Obviously, next week's going to be an encore episode. You're going to hear a full band demo of one of those songs. I'm not sure which one yet. You'll have to check in to find out, and we'll as per usual, we'll find a fun topic to discuss in a shorter format. But after that, the week after that, we'll be taking another deep dive into another fantastic horror film. And we decide that by spinning the wheel of horror to make a random decision for us what movie we will be checking out. On the wheel of horror at this current time are the movies. I'm going to shuffle them. I like to do that. It Follows, Intruder, The Strangers, Alien, Smile, Carrie, A Quiet Place, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, Weapons, 30 Days of Night, Sleepaway Camp, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And of course, also we have the sequel, which if we spin that, then we'll be watching a sequel to one of the movies we've already covered. But let's see what the Wheel of Horror has in store.
Not smile. Because it scares me.
Intruder.
Oh, yes.
What,
Yes.
What year was this movie? Just so we...
83, 84, I want to say.
No, it was later than that.
Oh, was it? I'm sorry. It's been a long time since we've watched it.
So, oops.
I'm going to get there. 1989.
1989. Because there's other movies called Intruder. The one we're talking about is the 1989 film, which was directed by Scott Spiegel, who I think recently passed away. Oh, I'm not wrong about that. Well, I mean, I hope I am wrong about that for his sake, but
August 2025, he passed away.
And as of right now, the movie's currently streaming on AMC Plus and likely Shudder. So if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It is a lot lighter than it's a lighter lifting.
I'm really glad we spun that after this because it is nice to kind of go back and forth between really, really heavy films and really dense films and something like this, which is a fun ride. This is a lot closer to Slumber Party Massacre than it is to The Shining.
Yeah, absolutely. Takes place in a grocery store, which I love. And we also need a gimmick for the song.
Oh, yeah. How are we going to write about it? These fun movies often get fun songs, too. So I'm excited. I really like this movie. I really thought it was earlier in the 80s, and I wonder why.
Because your perception of time is false.
It's flawed for sure. What be the gimmick?
Character study.
Ooh, so we get to pick one character?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I am psyched. Cool. Well, we hope you come back next week to finish talking about something light following The Shining, and then after that for Intruder, which that deep dive will be in 2 weeks. As always, you can find us online at OMNLD Pod on your favorite social media platform, on the internet at omnldpod.com, and yeah, share us with your friends.
Yes, please. Tell one of your friends that
Just one.
likes this stuff. Or you could yell it in the streets if you want.
You could. I feel like that would be less efficient.
Less effective, at least.
Yeah, for sure. But hey, as long as people who love to talk for a long time about movies, and specifically horror movies, will help them to find us. Help us help you.
Well,
that's been it. It's been grand.
Well, we hope to have you on board next week. Thank you so much for being here, and have a lovely day? I don't know. We don't usually say that.
That's all right. You're trying on new stuff. You gotta keep trying new stuff. You know what I mean?
That's right. We're just getting delirious after all of this.
It's been a lot. All right.
Talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.